Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate that you all are taking the time out of your day to join us here to talk about our favorite new end-to-end analytics product, Microsoft Fabric. My name is Shannon Lindsay, and I'm here today with my colleague, David Abu. David, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hope I'm good.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you for joining us. My name is David Abu, and I work with the data advocacy team. And majorly the things that we do is majorly on Microsoft Fabric, and I'm happy to share the stage with Shannon. I and Shannon has been talking a lot on Twitter and LinkedIn, but this is the first time that we are presenting together, and I'm happy. So let's see what happens today. Back to you, Shannon.
Excellent. Thanks so much, David. And I will take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Shannon, and I work as a content developer in the Worldwide Learning Department at Microsoft. And what that means is I am so lucky to be able to create learning materials for all of you. So we welcome you all to follow along with us. We have a bunch of short links throughout the slide deck, and our producer, Anna, is going to help us by dropping links in the chat as we go. But please follow along. We are following a Microsoft Learn module where we're going to take you through everything that is required for administering Microsoft Fabric. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. The first thing that we'd love to do is to say thank you and hello to our moderator, Josh Ndemenge. Josh is here in the chat. He's here to help answer questions. So please drop your questions in the chat. If Josh cannot respond to them or wants to kick it over to us, David and I will be happy to respond to them as well. But just a quick reminder, this is live and we're here to chat with you. So please feel free if you have questions at any time, drop them in the chat and we'll take them as they come in. The first thing we wanted to do is just to make sure that we know that everyone knows where this is. So if you follow this short link, Learn Live-2023 1024A, say that 10 times fast, you will get to the module that is live on Learn. And of course, we want to chat with you. There are so many familiar and friendly faces in the audience. I feel like we always have the David Abu fan club, so welcome. And please continue to chat with us. Alrighty, so what are we talking about today? The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to give an over. Oh, go ahead, David.
Yeah, so today we are going to do an overview of what Microsoft Fabric is and the description of Fabric admin tags. And also the next thing that we are going to do is to navigate the admin center. And the next thing is that we want to manage the user access. So as we are going through this, we're also going to be showing you some demos and also some links on how you are going to do it. Shannon, can you take us through the introduction of Fabric?
Yes, thanks, David. I'm happy to. Alrighty, so before we get into talking about what is this Fabric thing, we want to make sure that everyone has access to the product itself. So if you follow the short links here on the screen, and Anna will help us by dropping them in the chat as well, you'll be able to sign up for your own Fabric trial. If you are one of the lucky ones, you may have a Fabric trial already enabled in your corporate tenant. If you are someone else, you will need to potentially sign up for your own Fabric trial tenant. And this actually is really nice because it's going to enable you to play around with Fabric in your own basically sandbox. So what you'll need to do is you'll sign up for the Microsoft 365 developer program. You'll then sign up for Power BI, and then you will activate Microsoft Fabric. So if anyone's having any issues with that, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I also see we have loads of experts that are here with us in the chat. So everyone, feel free to interact with each other.
Okay, great. So for the introduction, one of the things that we are looking at is making sure that we see understanding the back end of Microsoft Fabric within your organization. And one of the things that you have to look at is that Microsoft Fabric, you have to work closely with your business users, your data analysts, and the other IT professionals to be
And
careful
it,
of the type of access, the security, the things that you have to give people to. Shannon, are you asking a question?
yes, sorry to interrupt. I think we're having some bandwidth issues and we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
Oh, okay. So you know what? Let me just go out and come in. But why you take it up?
Okay, perfect. All right, thanks so much. Sorry about that. And thanks everyone for bearing with us. This is a live show, and sometimes the demo goddesses are not always with us. So we're going to just jump back in. David will come back on when he is able to. So I'm going to take us through the next slide. Just, as our introduction, we want to mention to you what is this Fabric thing and who are admins. If you are familiar with Power BI, this everything we're covering here is going to look very familiar to you. So let's jump into the content itself, and you will see that this follows right along with the content in the Learn module. I'm checking out the jokes in the chat. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about the architecture of Microsoft Fabric, and we're really talking high level. What are the conceptual things that you need to understand before you're able to either A, administer your own tenant, or B, become friends with your administrator so you can ask them for things. All right, so first things first. Is there anyone in the chat or on the line that has not heard much about Fabric yet? Anyone brave enough to admit that this is new to you? It's relatively new to all of us, so there's no worries there. So if this is new to you, Microsoft Fabric is an all-in-one analytics solution for the enterprise. Great, it's new to someone. And the nice thing about Microsoft Fabric is that you take all of the different bits and pieces that you used to use in an overall analytics solution, and they are now under one roof. And this sounds a bit abstract, so we're going to show you what it looks like. But really, what that means is that your data engineers, your data scientists, your analysts, and your business users can access everything that they need under one roof. And this, I think, is really nice. It's a software as a service platform, meaning that there's not a ton of configuration and management and things that you're going to need to work with your IT administrators to work out. So this really helps democratize or helps us as a data team be able to stand up the things that we need immediately and use them. So this Fabric architecture really is unique because it uses one lake as a native data store without needing any additional configuration. So OneLake is what everything kind of sits on top of. So here you have all of these, what we refer to as experience loads. So this is where your your data engineers, your data scientists, and your analysts are going to work in these workloads. But everything sits on top of this OneLake data store, and it is all stored in the open source Delta format. Now, you might be asking, okay, I'm going to be administering Fabric. Why does this matter to me? We really just need to have the basic understanding of what it is that we're looking at, and then, of course, how it's organized and how we manage security, how we manage users, how we manage sharing content. And I will say this again, if you are familiar with Power BI administration, this is going to look very familiar to you. So the first thing that I wanted to talk through are these terms that David and I are going to be throwing around, and fingers crossed to the demo goddesses that we get David back. But Fabric is really organized in a few different levels, and I want to talk them through just so that we're all on the same page. So the first thing that we always talk about when we're talking about Fabric is, what is a tenant? And a Fabric tenant is just a dedicated space for you as an organization to create, store, and manage Fabric items. So oftentimes you're going to have a single instance of Fabric for your organization, and that is aligned with Microsoft Entra, or Azure Active Directory, as it used to be known. And the Fabric tenant also maps to the root of the OneLake storage. So the tenant is your highest level thing. You can think of it like an apartment building that people are going to rent out apartments from. The next thing that we're going to talk about is your capacity. So your capacity is a dedicated set of resources that's available at a given time to be used by your data scientists or your data engineers or your analysts or whoever's working in Fabric. So the capacity just defines the ability of a resource to perform an activity or to produce an output. And Fabric capacity is offered or purchased through Fabric SKUs, and at this moment through Fabric trials. The next thing that I want to just concept to introduce is our Fabric domain. So a domain is a logical grouping of workspaces. And domains have been introduced in Fabric. You'll notice this is different from Power BI. They've been introduced in Fabric to help us organize our data in a way that makes sense in your organization. So for example, if you have a number of different workspaces that are related to everyone in the sales org, and you want everyone in the sales org to have access to those sales workspaces, you're going to assign the workspaces to a domain, which brings me to the next item, which is a workspace. If no one hears anything else about Fabric admin today, the main thing I think is really important is that all things inside of Fabric are organized into workspaces. This is how you work with your data team to work on analytic solutions. So you may have a lakehouse that is in a workspace. You may have a data warehouse in a workspace. You may have a workspace that stores your semantic models or your data sets. Workspaces are the main point of organization in Fabric, and this aligns very similarly to Power BI. Eric, I can see that you are very excited about workspaces. All right, and then finally, the last piece of the puzzle here is just this piece that we're calling items. These are just the things inside of Fabric. So this is your semantic model. This is your lakehouse. This is your data warehouse. These we're calling items. And the reason we're calling them out today is because, as you may know, you can share items in Fabric via a workspace, or you can share a single item itself. Best practice is to share via workspaces, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. It looks like we have David back, which is fabulous. And David, this is actually perfect timing because we're going to jump into talking about the Fabric admin role. Do you want to take us through? Should we try it out? While we're waiting to see if David's connection is working, we have a question in the chat that's asking, does Fabric have a premium workspace or is that Power BI only? So the answer to this question is anything that was formerly premium is now synonymous with Fabric. So Power BI will remain as a standalone product. It is a child of Fabric, but anything that is premium is now Fabric. So I hope that makes sense. And Paul, thank you so much for answering questions in the chat as well. And unfortunately, it looks like we lost David again, so I'm going to take a stab at telling us all what a Fabric admin is. Okay, so now that we broadly understand what is this Fabric product, how is it organized, it sits on top of one lake, let's talk about like what do you actually do as an admin and or what do you need to understand to ask your admin? I'd love to know before we go into this, do we have anyone in the chat who is an admin in your corporate tenant? I'd love for you to just type in the chat a little note that you're an admin. And then we'll know who to ask the real questions to. But part of the reason I'm asking this is because it's not very often that many people have admin privileges. And so some may say, what's the point of me learning about the admin? I'm not the admin. And I think the reality is that we as analysts, engineers, scientists, we need to know who to ask and specifically what to ask them for. So we now know that Scott, Stephen, and Nahat and Stephanie are all admins. We can also ask Christian. So if you have real world implementation questions about admin, you can already see in the chat who to ask. All right, so as a Fabric admin, you are responsible for managing this software as a service platform. The nice thing about it is that it is just that. It's a software as a service platform. You don't have to worry as much about managing and accessing Azure subscriptions, about managing resource groups. You don't have to worry about any of that. The main place that you are going to work as a Fabric admin is in the admin portal in Fabric. So, as an admin, you may be responsible for a bunch of different tasks to keep the platform running smoothly. I would imagine that many of you on the line see varying degrees of how active your admins are in your tenant. And what we want to do is empower ourselves so that we know what do these people control and what can we ask them for. So one of the most important aspects of Fabric administration is managing security and access control to make sure that only the people that should be seeing the data are seeing the data, right? So Fabric uses role-based access control to define who can view and edit content, who can set up gateways to connect to on-premises data sources, and then of course it uses Azure Active Directory, now Microsoft Entra, to manage access. One just hot tip, if anyone is new to working with Power BI or Fabric, using security groups in Microsoft Entra is an absolute best practice for distribution of Fabric content. And that Fabric content that will be distributed is going to be your Power BI apps. But taking advantage of the security that already exists in M365 and within Azure and using that in Fabric is going to be a great first step. The next thing that you are going to try to wrangle as a Fabric admin is data governance. Being an effective administrator requires that you understand, what is data governance? Why is it important? How do you secure inbound and outbound data? How do you apply data governance policies to ensure that data within your tenant is only accessible to authorized users? There is a series of implementation documents. I will find that link and drop it in the chat. But if you're wondering, okay, why is governance so important and what are the processes and people that need to be involved, we have some great documentation to help you down that path, because governance in this case is a lot of people and process and not as many tools in Fabric, but we'll take you through the tools that do exist. And then finally, monitoring and optimization is going to be something that you as a Fabric admin are going to be responsible for. And I'd imagine we're going to have quite a few questions about this monitoring as we go through. But what we are encouraging Fabric admins to do today is, as your users start to spin up Fabric trials, trial capacities rather, we are recommending that as you use those capacities, you monitor how much compute is being used by each of those processes using the capacity monitoring app, so that you can have an idea of how much is this thing going to cost you. And I am going to just pause for a moment and just check in with David. David, are you able to hear us?
I can hear you, but I just don't know if you can.
Okay, we can hear you now. I think we may have a bit of a delay, but please feel free to jump in at any time.
Okay, you can continue.
All right. Okay, so what are the tools that you as an admin are going to be using to make sure that this platform is running smoothly, that you understand what people are doing in it, that you understand how much money they're spending, and so that you can really wrangle this kind of wild, wild west as this Fabric world continues to grow? The needs for managing it effectively are also going to grow. So the first place that we are going to manage and just check out what our users are doing is in the Fabric admin portal. The really nice thing about that is that it's a web-based portal. You can manage just about everything in the product that you need to manage. One thing that you may notice or find interesting is that there are so many different bits and bobs within this admin portal. There's a lot going on in here, and we're going to take a look at this together in our demo. But just note, this is the first place that you're going to want to come. One thing just to point out here is that the product team has created this nice little flag for us so you can see what kinds of things are new. So here you can see the domains that I mentioned earlier are a new feature. And then this piece of the puzzle is really, really important. Under the tenant settings, if you are the tenant admin, this is where you're able to turn Fabric on and off for your users. This is really important because if you are working at your company and you'd like to start trying out Fabric, this is where you can point your admins and let them know, hey, this is where I'd like you to turn this button on. After you enable Fabric in your tenant, so after you politely ask your admin and buy them a coffee and they turn it on here in the portal, you then will also have to enable Fabric in your workspace, which brings up another type of administrator, which is a workspace admin. So far we've talked about this tenant admin. We're going to talk a little bit about what a capacity admin is. And then we also have workspace admins. And Christian is really throwing some jokes into the chat here, saying that the first setting we do is to activate the publish to web feature for everyone. I'm just going to mention out loud, I hope that's a joke. All right. So we're going to carry back on. We do have links to, the documentation for how to turn things on, how to turn on Fabric in the admin portal, how to turn off things like publish to web in your tenant, and you can access those via this QR code or this AKA link. One other thing that I'd like to mention, we're not going to go too deeply into this, but there are a bunch of other ways in addition to the portal that you can manage your tenant. There are also really cool new features that you can use. So for example, you can either use these PowerShell commandlets, or you can use some of the admin APIs. You can actually use those all in Fabric, like in a notebook, for example, to understand what are all of the workspaces, what are all of the data sets or semantic models, what are all of the processes that are happening in my tenant. So we wanted to point out that just these other tools exist. The PowerShell commandlets exist, admin APIs and SDKs exist, and this is for folks that want more control and more granular detail about what's going on in your tenant, whether that's monitoring usage or performance, looking at data sources and gateways. You can use these tools to do that in your tenant as well. Alrighty, so we have actually a nice new feature, and I'll show you this in the actual tenant as well, but we have a nice new feature in Fabric called the Admin Monitoring Workspace. For those of you that are admins, you will notice that by default, this shows up in your list of workspaces. If you poke around in there, you're going to see that you have access to this feature usage and adoption report that also has a data set behind it. The only person who this report shows up for natively is the admin. However, if you want other people to be able to see and use this report, you can take that data set and share it so that other people are able to see this information too. Alrighty, now we're going to jump into one of the most important and most difficult to talk about topics, which is Fabric security. What does it look like? How do you manage it? And here we go with a complicated diagram. Essentially, and I'm going to actually try to use the Zoom tool a little bit just so that we are not blocking off what's happening in the bottom here. Does that work? Yes. Okay, so Microsoft Fabric Security is based on Power BI security loosely, but it includes a whole lot more. And your role as the admin is to manage security for the whole environment. So that includes managing users and groups. It includes managing how users interact with Fabric in terms of sharing and distribution of content. And you'll see here that it includes Microsoft Information Protection, and if your organization uses Microsoft Purview, that link is natively built in. One additional thing to mention about using Microsoft Purview is that if you are an admin, you will notice in your admin workspace that is automatically provisioned for you by the product in the Fabric service, you will see there are two reports. There is one report that shows you, it's your admin monitoring report. It shows you what's going on in your tenant. The second report will show you information about data lineage and governance, and that you will see is linked to Microsoft Purview. And I am just scanning the comments here. It looks like we have so many experts in the chat that I am not needed here. So thanks, everybody. Okay, so talking more about security, the first thing that we need to do as an admin is to assign and manage licenses. licensing is a big question here. I know we have Stephanie Bruno on the line here, and she wrote a really nice blog post about how she thinks this licensing is going to work. So Stephanie, if you're able, I'd love for you to drop that link into the chat. This license management is interesting because you as the Fabric admin may not have access to be an M365 admin and to manage these licenses. And that's fine. But you do need to know who to talk to get these licenses assigned. And then you as the Fabric admin will turn everything on once you're in the Fabric admin portal and once you've enabled all of that. So license management for Fabric at this point is managed in the M365 Admin Center. And in the M365 Admin Center, you are going to have to ask your admin to turn on Power BI for your users. If you have, for example, an M365 E5 license already, you don't need to worry about that because Power BI is actually included in that license. If you have anything below E5, you're going to need to work with your admin to get that turned on. One additional comment about licensing that I just want to throw out there is that if you are building Power BI reports. Remember, Power BI is now one child of this overall Fabric mama. Okay, so if you are building and publishing Power BI reports, you will still need a Power BI Pro license. And I'm not going to get too into the weeds here because this gets very complicated very fast. But note, for building Power BI reports, you need a Power BI Pro license. I'm going to pause. If you are a data engineer, a data scientist, you're working further upstream on data in your Fabric workspaces, in your Fabric-enabled workspaces, rather, you do not need that additional Pro license. Okay, so Eric, I like your mention there that Power BI is one panel of the Fabric quilt. Perfection. Okay, so I'm going to move on from licensing because this, yes, it's important. It's going to have to be figured out once, but hopefully that's a one-time process. Hopefully it's not too painful. Then here's where you really come into play. And this is managing how users interact with Fabric in your tenant, including, sharing and distribution of content. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. If you remembered, we defined kind of what these workspaces are. So in your workspaces, you are able to assign different workspace roles. So if you are an admin of a workspace, that gives you all the permissions you will need to do anything in that workspace, including deleting that workspace. So if you are delegating responsibilities, as anyone should, and a great deployment plan of Power BI, great implementation plan. If you're delegating responsibilities, be sure you think really carefully about what these different roles are and what these different people are going to be able to do. One other thing to mention is that items in your workspaces are best distributed through a workspace app. And I'm just going to call that an app because that's what it's called now. But what I'd like to mention is that when we're working in Fabric, because this now includes all of the ingestion and transformation that you've done upstream, the Power BI baby that is distributed in an app is just the final product. Well, not just the final, it is the final product for your business users to make decisions off of. The only thing that we are distributing in our Power BI app is Power BI reports and dashboards and whatever other kinds of documents and information you want to put in that app. But generally speaking, you are not going to be distributing a lakehouse or a data warehouse or any behind the scenes pieces of the Fabric puzzle or any of the behind the scenes children of the Fabric mama. Okay, we're going to jump into governance. I'm seeing a lot of chat in the chat, a lot of chat in the chat about licensing and different F SKUs and P SKUs and how those all work. I will say that Microsoft has a big event coming up, Microsoft Ignite. I would welcome everyone to register for that. You can register online, it is free, and we may hear more information about, this Fabric Mama at Ignite. So stay tuned to that. As far as data governance in Fabric, there are some inbuilt governance features to help you manage and control your data. I do want to mention, as a person who implements these tools, governance is often about people and processes, not necessarily about inbuilt features in the tools. So keep in mind that this is something you need to actively manage. With that, you can use the built-in features within Fabric to manage and control your data. So we have things like endorsement in Fabric, where you can endorse and promote and certify semantic models, data sets, and other Fabric items. We also have a scanner API that you as an admin can use to scan Fabric items for sensitive data. And there's also a data lineage feature that's really neat that you can use to track the flow of data through Fabric. So I mentioned this endorsing Fabric content. Again, this is something that is inbuilt in the tool, but it's something that we as admins and as people who are implementing this are going to need to teach people about. So you see this little endorsement column here. And it's a bit hard to see because my text is covering it, but you are able to both promote and certify specific Fabric items so that people who are using the data, so your data engineers, your analysts, anyone who's working with the items in Fabric, know, okay, this item has been certified. I'm allowed to use this in a report. This is trusted data. Maybe this is your gold layer of your medallion architecture, and you only certify gold layers for people to use. There are many different processes you could put into place to make sure that this is well managed, but this is just one piece of the tool that does exist. And I do want to mention here in the screenshot, you only see children of Power BI that are promoted and certified, but all Fabric content can be promoted or certified. So you can have a certified lakehouse, you can have a certified data warehouse, and those things will be able to tell your users what it is they need to do with it. One quick note related to certification. If you are not an admin, you are not able to certify items in Fabric. So this is another kind of process piece of the puzzle. So you're going to need to determine, how do we as an organization determine if something is, valuable, if something is legit and ready to be certified. That's a process piece. And then in the admin portal, your admins will be able to certify those items. Okay, so here's just a quick link for you to be able to access the content we were just talking about. And I'm just gonna, I'm being thwarted by my captions here, so I'm gonna just move away from the screen. The next thing that I mentioned that I just wanted to go through is the ability for admins to scan for the metadata in your organization's Fabric items. So we have metadata scanning. It enables you to catalog and report on the metadata that's in your Fabric tenant, essentially. So the scanner API is what you're going to use. It's a set of admin REST APIs that allows you to scan for this sensitive data. The really cool thing about this is that you can create Fabric inception and use these APIs within Fabric to get an overall view of what's going on in your report. And actually, Stephanie Bruno, who's on the line, showed me this just the other day, and my jaw dropped. So this is a really cool feature that you can use. All right, and then finally, we're going to talk about data lineage. This is another really amazing feature in Fabric. For those of you that are familiar with the golden child, as Eric mentioned, Power BI, this data lineage feature has existed within workspaces in the past. But what is really, really neat to see now is that you can track the data you can track the data lineage all the way upstream. So you can see how the data flows through Fabric, whether that is coming from your lakehouse or it's coming from a database. You can see what is being created from those. So, here in this top example, you can see that the data is coming from a lakehouse. It's been then put into a data mart. We then have 3 separate data sets or semantic models that lead into 3 distinct reports. So you can really follow this and see, okay, well, first of all, am I going to break anything by cleaning up my workspace? Okay, so this is something that anyone who has access to the workspace is able to see this data lineage. And I am going to jump into one of my favorite resources. Christopher Maneu, one of our colleagues, has developed these Fabric notes. And you can find these at aka.ms/Fabric notes. He has one about licensing. And this is just a nice way for me to consume all of the information that exists in the documentation. Anna will help us out with some links that we have for what the current pricing is. It's really, really difficult to understand what does this mean. 18 cents per capacity unit per hour, minimum 2 capacity units. So what we recommend that you do, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but I will mention it again, is if you are an admin, even if you're an admin of your own tenant, be sure to install the Fabric Capacity Monitoring app so that you can see what affects different workloads. So, if you're, let's say you're transforming data in a data flow Gen 2, but you also want to see what it looks like if you transform data using Python in a notebook. So you can do those 2 operations. Then you can use the capacity monitoring app to see what it does to your capacity side by side and what's going to be ultimately the most cost efficient for you. Okay, and there we go. Lost control of my mouse for a second there. All right, so finally, we are going to jump into a demo. I am just going to walk you through what the admin portal looks like in my demo tenant. And then if folks have questions or you want to see something, we can try to look at those together. So let me try to jump in. Code with Sean, let us know which link you're getting a 404 on. And give me just one moment. Gonna find my demo. I'm feeling a little discombobulated because I've lost my partner. But here we are. Okay, so I'm gonna actually take a step back here and I'm gonna take us to the Fabric landing page just because this is the first time that some people have seen this. And okay, we can see the demo. Great. All right. So for those of you who are wondering who all the babies of Mama Fabric are, here they all are. They're right here. So we have our Power BI, which, as we've mentioned, may be the golden child. A lot of people on the line are familiar with that. We also have this data factory workload, which is where you're going to do your data integration, your ETL or ELT, depending on what it is you are doing. Data Activator is our newest baby of the family. Data Activator is going to help us take action on data as it's coming in. We have our data engineering, our data science, and you can see these have multiple parents. So Fabric Mama, Synapse, Dad, maybe, or maybe 2 Fabric Mamas. But these are all coming from Synapse, and we also have Synapse Real-Time Analytics. Once you jump into Fabric, and I'm just going to pick a workload, any workload, you will see here, if you are the admin of your tenant, you have access to this admin portal. This should look very, very familiar to you. Alrighty. Within the admin portal, I mentioned before, we have these tenant settings at the top level. Who can access these tenant settings? Not everyone. If you are the tenant admin, you can access these tenant settings, and you can see here the top two items that you're going to want to look at are enabling Fabric and enabling Data Activator. You can also see here we have these new little flags that tell us what is and is not new. Now, one thing just to note, there are a lot of settings in here. This can feel a bit overwhelming. You can use the search bar to try to figure out. You can also just do a Control F, and this is where you're going to find all of the things that you as a tenant admin need to manage. The next thing I want to step through is our domains, because this is also new. If you are an admin, you can create domains. And again, this is another piece of the puzzle that is really going to depend on how you as an organization are planning to implement this platform. You may find domains really, really useful. If you do, I'd love to hear about it. Or when you do, we'd love to hear about it because this is a brand new feature. And then finally, I want to talk about these capacity settings. I did mention that there is also a capacity admin. So you can have multiple Fabric capacities within your Fabric tenant. I hope I haven't lost anyone yet, but you can have multiple capacities within your tenant, and this is where you're going to manage that. There may be, in the case of managing Fabric capacities, particularly if you're looking at managing, compute resources and cost and things like that, use that capacity monitoring app, the Fabric capacity monitoring app that you can install. Take a look at what's going on and then make a decision about how it is that you want to manage things. So if you are implementing the medallion architecture with your storage, your lake houses and your data warehouses, you may decide to store different layers of the medallion architecture in different capacities or in different workspaces. And you may think about turning things on and off or sizing things up and down, depending on how it is that you want to manage this. I am going to pause for just a moment. Scott just asked a question in the chat, and I'd love to talk this through a little bit more. So Scott asks for guidance on domains. He's mentioning that they already have workspaces loosely aligned around subject areas and how or if it would be appropriate to use domains with this. So I would like to, I'm just going to jump back to domains here. And I'm going to show you some of the settings that are available. So essentially, there are two things we can look at here. The delegated settings are not available to me at this time, so I'm not going to go through them. But one thing that you can do that I find to be really could be powerful, depending on how you plan to implement it, is this idea of domain admins. So this is another admin level where you can have people, you can delegate that level of control. So if, for example, Scott, you already have a single, finance workspace or a single workspace for a certain, subject matter. You may need more than one workspace, and then you can group them and you can give different people control over what it is that they need to do with them. If anyone else has ideas about how you would use domains, I'd love to see that in the chat. Again, this is new. I haven't implemented it yet, so you all are the experts. And yes, I do believe that if you are the admin of a domain, you are then also an admin of those workspaces that get created under the domain. So the permissions flow down. We're going to need to test. Oh, hey, you're still here.
I am.
Wonderful.
I am. So there was a question about custom branding. Eric says that, can you touch a little bit on custom branding?
Sure. Custom branding as far as branding in the
admin portal. So you can look, you can say
portal.
after the workspace,
Aha.
there is, yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I believe, and David, please correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe that this custom branding is for your overall tenant. So if you're, if you want your tenant to adhere to your custom brand, this is my brand is teal because it's my favorite color. You're going to make the whole portal appear teal. You're going to have your company logo in there, and that's going to appear across your whole entire tenant. I think that is as deep as this gets. David, do you know any more about that?
Nah, so that is just the major thing. How you want your reporting to look like as a whole. Sorry, I'm doing it from the audio side. You can see me. I'm so sorry. So how you want your reporting to look like when it comes to the branding aspect. So especially within the app, that is the major focus for the custom branding. So I hope we answered Eric's questions.
Excellent. Thank you. And David, thank you. I'm so glad you're still here. I wonder if real quick we can just pick my favorite color and see what this does. Everybody loves a live demo on the fly.
Cool.
That didn't seem to work, but we're just going to go with it. Are there any other questions related to, so we talked about tenant admins, we talked about being a domain admin, we also talked about being a capacity admin. The next thing I'd like to show is just to jump into the workspaces and to just show what you can do as a workspace admin. But before I do that, are there any other questions about what you're seeing here, particularly things that might be new to you?
None for now. Not for now. I think everybody loves the whole presentation for now, so we're good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into a workspace here. And as you can see, speaking of custom branding, this is my demo tenant. So I have this little icon here. That's my profile picture, just so I know not to use this in anything in production. But when we are within our workspace, there are two things that I wanted to mention here. The first thing is, if you are a workspace admin, you now have access to these workspace settings, and these look a little bit different than they used to. So I wanted to walk through these a little bit, and if anyone has questions as we go through them, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So the first thing that you can do, this should look familiar. You can rename your workspace, add a description, assign it to a domain. So this could be helpful for some of you. Then we have this license mode. This is another piece of the puzzle that's going to become really important for those of you that are trying to play with Fabric for the first time. Once you create a new workspace, you do need to go to these workspace settings, and you need to ensure that you are in the trial mode for Fabric. The next piece of the puzzle that we have here are Azure connections. You can connect to an ADLS Gen 2 storage account. Pardon me, and you can also connect to Azure Log Analytics. This one will be particularly useful for a lot of you hands-on admins. The system storage here, I'm not going to go into. This just shows you what you're using with your data sets in the workspace. This next piece of the puzzle, I'd love to hear some feedback in the chat or even just excitement about this Git integration. What you can do here, oh, and it looks like I've already tested it with my very official dev account name, Beep Boop Bop. You can link your workspace to an Azure DevOps Git-based repo for source control of the objects in your workspace. I'd love to see or to hear if anyone else is already using this. I think this could potentially be a game changer, particularly for just collaborating on different things within Fabric. I think this is going to be really awesome. I am not going to remove this workspace, so we're going to jump away from that. We then have our Power BI specific settings. This should look familiar to you, so I'm not going to jump through this. We do have the embed code section. If you find that people are publishing to web and that somehow was accidentally turned on in your tenant, you'll be able to see those embed codes right there, and then you can ask your admin to turn them either on or off. Then finally, this piece is really really neat, and this is new and I think very important for us to know about as Fabric admins. We have the ability to manage the Spark compute and to manage the library settings within our Fabric tenant. This is at the workspace level, so let me not actually say the word tenant to confuse people. This is at the workspace level, but you can change the default starter pool for your Spark pool. You can change the runtime version. You can turn high concurrency on and off. There are a bunch of different properties that you're able to adjust here. I personally will need to consult with someone to know what to do here. Then finally, the last piece of the puzzle is that you are able to add different existing libraries or custom libraries to work with your Spark jobs or to work with whatever it is that you are using in your notebooks or in your data science experiments in Fabric. So these are at a very high level, these are your workspace settings that are available to you. So I'm going to pause because we've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about tenant, right? So that's your apartment building. We've talked about capacity. We've talked about domains, and there's been a ton of great chat about domains, so thank you. We've also talked about workspaces. Are there any questions or clarification needed about these different levels of admin?
Okay, so a question was asked by David. It says, what about a GitHub workspace, not Azure DevOps? Would that be available?
Excellent question. Not available at this time, but keep your eye on the upcoming announcements.
Great. Also, for those who might be looking at, there was a stuff I wanted to show about the lineage. So if you click on, let's say, click on sales, so the three dots beside sales, the
The lake house or the data set?
The data sets. Like we can look at data sets, the data sets. Okay, so you can view lineage, yes. So that is where we get for you to see how every data are connected, where are they coming from and where are they going to. You can look at the properties to know the child item that is impacted, either one or two. What are the workspaces that are impacted. So I actually wanted to show that during my presentation, but the God says not possible.
That's okay, we're together, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, David. This lineage feature is really incredible, particularly when you're managing workspaces that a bunch of different people are working in and you're trying to see who's connected to what and how does everything work. And if I clean something up, what is that going to impact? And so this little pop-up here will show you what is being impacted by what. It's really powerful.
I agree.
David, is there anything else you wanted to point out in the service itself?
No. You've done a great job already. So yes, so you're good. I don't know, maybe you want to talk about the managed access for people, especially the admins.
Oh, sure. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Let's talk through this managing access. So within your workspaces, you are able to add someone. Let's see what kind of people I have in here. You're able to add people as either an admin, a member, a contributor, or a viewer. I am not going to describe each of these line by line because I will probably get it wrong. I will direct you to the docs to check out what permissions each of these people have. The one thing I do want to reiterate is that if you are giving people access to the workspace itself solely for the purposes of viewing Power BI reports, the Power BI baby, you may want to rethink how you're doing that. You may want to distribute those in an app. However, if someone needs to approve something and there's a process that needs to get kicked off before it gets distributed in the app, that's when you would add them as a viewer. You can also add people as a viewer just so that they can see what's going on in the workspace and what's the, uh-oh. I'm stuck. I'm stuck zoomed in.
That's fine.
There we go. Sorry if I'm making anyone dizzy with what I'm doing there. But yes, so there are different levels of access. So what David is pointing out here just reiterates the fact that we have all of these different layers and levels of control. There are levels of control at the workspace level. Say that again. Levels of control at the workspace. There are levels of control within a domain. There are levels of control within a single capacity. And then you have, of course, your parent controls at the tenant level. It's important, if you need to know to ask your admin for something, that you know where that thing is located and how to ask and what kind of coffee they like. So just keep all of that in mind. And yeah, actually, Eric mentions a good point in the chat about thinking about row level security as well. That's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your lake house, your warehouse, your semantic models flowing all the way down through the Power BI baby. The chat is cracking me up. Okay, David, I am going to jump into the knowledge check if that is okay with you. I'm going to just take us all through a little bit of a quiz to see if you are paying attention. We will be keeping score. I'm kidding, not keeping score. But we do encourage you to join us in the knowledge check. You can go to, let's see if I can get this on the screen, aka.ms/polls. There we go. Thank you, Anna. Put that in the chat since I'm blocking it here with my captions. All right. So which of the following statements best describes the concept of capacity in Fabric? Love to know what your thoughts are there. And I am going to watch these results as they come in.
It might be tricky a little bit, but for those who are following, they should get it. So you have your A, capacity refers to a dedicated space for organization to create, store, and manage Fabric items. For B, you have capacity defines the ability of a resource to perform an activity or to produce output. And C, capacity is a collection of items that are logically grouped together. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's see. Are people picking?
Yes. Let me give you an update. So we have votes for A and B. We have no votes for C at this time.
Cool.
All right. So the correct answer here, this is the wording of the question is a bit tricky, but the answer is A. Capacity refers to a dedicated space. No. The correct answer is not A. The correct answer is B, right, David? Capacity defines the resources that are used to perform an activity or produce an output.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Perfect. Now, let's talk a little bit about why it's not A, because look at how I just got confused reading it there on the screen. The dedicated space for organizations to create, store, and manage Fabric items is what? That's
so let's see if people,
right?
Exactly, that is a workspace. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Good thing I at least sort of know what I'm talking about. All right, let's jump to our next question. And this is, which of the following statements is true about the difference between promotion and certification in Fabric? And remember, this was one of those inbuilt data governance tools. So answer A is that promotion and certification both allow any workspace member to endorse content. B is that promotion requires a higher level of permissions than certification. And C is that certification must be enabled in the tenant by the admin, while promotion can be done by a workspace member. What are we thinking there? What's the correct answer?
I think some people will go for A, and some people might likely go for C. So I'm thinking it might be in between those two answers.
All right, Kinda. I've got my eye on the poll here. Votes are coming in hot for C. Votes are coming in hot. We had actually nobody voted for A. We had 2 people vote for B, and everyone else has voted for C. And that is the correct
Cool.
answers. So do remember that these inbuilt tools are great for helping you govern what's going on with your data, but governance in Fabric is about people and processes. I can't reiterate that one enough. All right, our next question is that it was the last question. Live trickery again. Okay, let's just do a quick summary. And David, I know that you were a bit in and out, but do you want to take us through just a quick summary of some of the things we talked about today?
Yeah, so thank you very much, everyone. So for the summary, is that we described everything about Fabric, what Fabric is, and the administrative part of Fabric, the different tasks. We spoke about it. We talked about how to navigate the admin center. We talked about the branding side. We talked about how you give access to everyone. We also talked about the lineage, and we did a whole lot. And then we moved into the access part where we talked about role security. We talked about knowing that you can have the viewers, we can have the other parts of people who needs to have access or control over the data or the report. So yes, so we hope we've learned a lot today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, for taking us through that. We now want to just mention, and if you have additional questions, please put them in the chat. We're not done yet. But we want to mention that if you go through this learning path, you go through the units, we are also currently running a cloud skills challenge where you are able to participate and complete the challenge and get points for that. It's all a part of this Learn Live. You'll see all of the links in the description of in the YouTube or Twitch description. David, is there anything else to mention before we take a couple more questions?
None for now. I think we'll be able to take some questions. And this has been for the past, I think, 8 weeks.
Yes.
We're running the Learn Live, and this is the last show. So thank you very much for everyone who has been here from week 1 down to today. So thank you very much. So if you have any questions, please push them here, please. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And I'm seeing a ton of familiar faces here, friends, community members, just folks who have attended many of these sessions. So we really thank you for your time. We know you have a lot of things you could and probably should be doing right now, but you chose to spend it with David and I. So thank you so much for joining. If you have additional questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will continue to monitor, but I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up for now. So thanks everyone for joining. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, everyone.